The key question it comes down to is, why do some entrepreneurs succeed while majority of them fail? The ratio of success to failure is like 1:9. So for every 9 entrepreneurs that fail, one of them probably succeeds. When I quit Apple Computer in 1990, I began to really look at how do people learn, lead, collaborate, and innovate. After interviewing about 200 extraordinarily capable people, including CEOs, sports persona, musicians, spiritual leaders, Nobel laureates, I began to think I had some answers. With that answers, I began to identify why would some people succeed while many people fail. I came up with a list. In 1990s, I put together like 10 things that people could use to become successful. They seem to be pretty good, especially because I recently tried to ask a large number of people what made them successful. Many of these criteria still show up as important criteria for people to be successful. Except in the 1990s, towards the later part, when many of my clients, both large companies and entrepreneurs, became successful, I really began to feel confident, and I went ahead and started my own startup. So I raised about $1 million from angel investors, and I put in $500,000 of my own, and I worked with them, but within a year and a half, mine just went flat out, gone. That gave me kind of a pause. And then I found out during the same time, many of the entrepreneurs also lost their, what you might call the stake that they put into their company. That gave me not just a pause, I began to look at it and say, do I really know what makes people successful? Whatever I learned from other people, are they applicable? Can I actually apply some of these 10 principles in my startup? If I couldn't make my startup successful with them, do they have any meaning for any other entrepreneurs? So right after the dot-com bust, I began to spend a lot more time with the practicing entrepreneurs, researching again, interviewing, working with them, and helping them to understand what's going on. And in the meantime, I began to look at the success criteria in the 2000 afterwards. So I researched, started a Thai institute, and several thousand entrepreneurs had gone through. And then I also started teaching in business schools. I realized that every answer that I have is necessary, but none of them are sufficient. So I decided I will do the crowdsourcing. That is the in thing right now, right? So I wrote to various people in variety of groups that I am, both individually and in collectively. I started asking them, if they are entrepreneurs, what did make them successful? If everything else is gone, is there one secret sauce that made them to be successful? Is there one secret sauce that made them fail? So I ended up getting large number of answers from not only entrepreneurs, but also from professors, but from VCs, investment bankers, researchers, and I spent large amount of time looking at even Kaufman Foundation reports, various other serial entrepreneur research that has been done. I looked at it. To my disappointment, I found out there is no secret sauce. There is none whatsoever. Interestingly, if there were to be one algorithm, one formula that applies objectively in every situation to everybody, chances are every one of the entrepreneurs can become successful, right? It doesn't happen. What it means is, objectively, some of the principles may be the same, subjectively how you apply them, subjectively how you integrate multiple principles, that's what makes you successful. In some respects, I was beginning to recognize there is no opportunity to really understand any one person who can help me to understand about serial entrepreneurship and certain number of recipes that could help people to be successful. At that time, I came across a gentleman called Des Deshpande. He is the co-chair of the National Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship for the President Obama at this moment. He is also a trustee of the board of MIT, and he had started Cascade Communications, Sycamore Network, Tejas Network, A123, several of them, and many of them he got like $400 million, $2 billion. He took some of them public, he sold some of them. He was extraordinarily successful in multiple ventures. Not only that, what I was amazed to hear was that he was able to create innovation sandboxes in Merrimack Valley, in Massachusetts. He is able to create something in Hubli, Karnataka, not Bangalore, Karnataka, but Hubli, Karnataka, which is a very hidden place from the entrepreneurial world. He was able to work with the local people, and he was able to resuscitate entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial capabilities. So Canada, United States, India, if he's able to do it, I thought he might be able to help me to think about. So when I began to spend time with him, several of the principles which I talked about before began to fall together in a completely different way. I found out many of these kinds of recipes are oxymoronic in perspective. So in some respects, to some extent, they are helpful. If you become obsessed with them, if you try to overuse them as if those are the only principles, they will backfire on you. So there is a smart way in which you can apply principles from outside. There is a wise way in which you can apply them. So it's a combination of some of those. Out of all this, I came up with top 10 list of what I have found that might be most useful compared to many other things which I talked about. I tried to put them as oxymoronic principles. So let me start with my top 10 list, begin with the 10. First, stop obsessing about entrepreneurial success. Of course, you might ask, why would I actually listen to this advice if I want to be successful? Should I forget about succeeding and keep focusing on failure? No, that's not what I am saying. I am saying you should pay attention to success more as a measure, not as a principle by which you do what you do. For example, if you take one of the greatest entrepreneurs and who created the largest company are currently on the market, interestingly, he talked about what is his larger purpose, his noble purpose. He said, I would like to make a large dent in the universe. For that purpose, towards that goal, I'm willing to fail and I'm willing to experiment. So in 2007, when Apple did not have any background in telecommunications, did not have any products, did not have anything to do with technology in the telecommunications area, he came up with iPhone. People laughed at it. Steve Ballmer gave an interview saying, would anybody buy a $600 telephone? So BlackBerry, Nokia, all of them said something like, we seriously invite Apple. Let's see where they go. Of course, now we know where they are. Nokia is struggling. BlackBerry is renamed itself from Research in Motion to BlackBerry. So 40 to 50% of the Apple revenues continue to come from this particular iPhone and then the next versions of it and then the iPad that came out. So can we say Steve Jobs didn't obsess about success? Of course not. But at the same time, he was a guy who was willing to take risks, not focus on what other people think, not focus on whether his products are successful or not. He's going to do them because that is where his passion is, that is where his heart is, and that is what he thinks that the customers need it, because he is willing to be a customer for his own products. So from that perspective, you need to not worry about success, do what needs to get done connected with a larger purpose. That's the first principle. Second and most important it becomes is, where is your foot nailed to the floor? Of course, as I was preparing, my colleague was asking me, shouldn't you say, is your foot nailed to the floor? There is a guarantee that your foot is nailed to the floor. It is just a question of knowing where is it nailed? Because whatever is your success recipe, your winning formula that got you to this point is not going to get you to where you want to go. That is for certain. Why is that? The context has changed. The market is rapidly changing. The world is becoming smaller and interconnected. So whatever recipe you got before to become successful will not work. Like I was talking to a gentleman who sold his Hotmail company for $400 million a few years ago. He was telling me the recipe would be probably eyeballs. You need to pay attention to eyeballs. But when I talked to somebody else, he was telling me that he has 5 Hotmail accounts. That means 10 eyeballs, but he uses only 1. So if you keep measuring the success based on the number of eyeballs, actual success will be seriously affected, because that's not how people act. So in some respects, you need to look at not just what is my core competence, my core incompetence. As I mentioned before, the BlackBerry was the best smartphone that you could have. People said, how can you have a smartphone without the keyboard? You cannot have a touch screen. But now, of course, the BlackBerry 10 has a touch screen just as anybody else. Of course, to make sure that they are not abandoning the people who use the keyboard, they also have a version with the keyboard. But will it help BlackBerry or not? We don't know yet to see. But Nokia for sure is struggling quite a bit. They were number 1, but their pretty much simple phones are no longer as useful. 40% of the consumers around the world are using smartphones, and they are continue to grow in it. Only one model, Lumia 920, recently has shown some promise. Hopefully, Nokia will find its bearings and become successful, but till they begin to recognize their foot is nailed to the floor based on the past practices and what worked, unless they change it and re-look at the context in which they operate, they will not become successful. Number 8 on my list is practice wise persistence. We all know when we start as entrepreneurs, whatever idea we come up with, we have to persist through the various stages, whether it is the funding stage, whether it is the stage of after you get the funding, whether it is getting the proof of concept, whether it is the prototype to be successful, whether it is through execution. It's all about persistence, and you need to stay in the market till you become successful. Everybody knows that, right? But if that is not going where you want to go, if it is no longer aligned with your larger purpose, if you believe that the market has moved on, should MySpace still be hanging around even though the Facebook has pretty much gone and taken over the entire world? So the key part you need to look at is, when do you cut the cords? When do you hold on? When do you let go? That wisdom will only come if you have a larger purpose. Why am I doing this startup? What is the underlying mission that I have, and what is the underlying problem that I am solving for the customer? If you really look at the Pinterest recent one, Ben Silberman, he says at one time he was ready to give up and he wanted to go back and ask for a job in Google, but he was not sure he will get a job back, because 9 months after they released the Pinterest, he found out it was not growing at all. As a matter of fact, one of the co-founders went and took a job somewhere else. And he called, he says, first 5,000 people, and he met with several of his 5,000 customers, but still there was no traction. But because he believed in that, and the timing was right, and he was able to get appropriate attention, now it is the number 3 social network site, and also the company is worth more than $1.5 billion at this moment. Next on the list is integrity. Interestingly, as I looked at, are there entrepreneurs with integrity that I could identify and highlight, I couldn't find any. I couldn't find anybody whom I can say they are known for their integrity alone that I could put in. Yes, Deshpande seems to have had a lot of integrity. He continues to have integrity. But beyond that, if you really use my yardstick, you need to have credibility. That means you need to walk the talk. Second, you need to be committed to your employees as much as they are committed to you. You need to be committed to other people in the ecosystem, like your customers, your suppliers, your partners. If that is the way in which you define the integrity, plus if you add the courage, that means you are authentic and you are doing something that you have passion for and you have a commitment for. And if I define it as credibility plus commitment plus courage, what defines integrity, there are very few people. So in some respects, you need to begin to build the network, and that's the only way you can do. Next is passion and compassion. You need a lot more than obsession. In some respects, if you look at Steve Jobs, is a representation of obsession, but Bill Gates, for that matter, went into some other area with a Gate Foundation. He is able to make something work much more effectively. In practice, you need to take more reflective actions and practice Jugaad. Jugaad is a creative improvisation. Create it with your customers, create it with your people, and just don't have an action bias. You need to take reflection at different stages of organization and different stages of your startup. You may need to think about what needs to get done and how do we move forward. For example, if you take Instagram, they had much bigger product beforehand, and instead of just the photo sharing, they had a note sharing. They went ahead, cut down the features, sharply focused. They stayed with one platform and made it successful. Just before they got bought out by Facebook, they went ahead and released an Android and increased their customer base from 10 million to 30 million. So continuous improvement and Jugaad helps you quite a bit in that respect. It is not the risk taking that differentiates you, but it is the risk mitigation, because risk taking is part of the definition of an entrepreneur. But at the same time, risk mitigation happens when everybody in your company can share your decision, do not blame each other, and are willing to go on the path the same way. When everybody is actually bringing their collective intelligence to solve the problems, the chances of your company becoming successful becomes much higher. Finally, you need to look at execution is not the only thing, and it is not everything, because if you take Palm, if you take Kodak, who invented the digital camera, those are already gone. The Palm is absorbed and disappeared, so their execution was excellent, they didn't have a big picture. So what you need is a foresight, which requires both the context sensitivity, knowing what's going on around you, plus instinct. Instinct is what you need. For example, Blockbuster was $4 billion company which went bankrupt despite the fact they had all the resources Netflix had got. Netflix almost also lost the context because they came up with the DVD as a separate one, but it looks like they are able to convince the customers the digital downloading is the right way. If I go back to the last and the most important, purpose, especially a noble purpose, even though it looks like an oxymoron, is much more important than the vision. Everybody talks about a vision, but vision needs to keep changing as the context changes, as the product changes. We know that when we go to founders, go to some kind of venture capitalists or angel investors, as soon as you get the money, the vision changes. There are companies, whether you take Whole Foods by John Mackey or Infosys Narayana Murthy, these are the people who believed in a larger purpose, so they were willing to share their secret formulas. When they became the level 5 certified in the software, they brought all their competitors and shared their recipes so that everybody could be at the same level as they are. In Whole Foods, the same way, my friend tells me, if you are an employee and if you can actually go ahead and reduce your BMI and have health practices, Whole Foods gives you better employee discount for its own products. So to end, I would say, as an entrepreneur, your time is short. You need to focus on what is most important to you. You need to focus on where you have the commitment and where you have the passion. With that, instead of trying to outsmart somebody else, if you can be a wise leader, chances of success seems to significantly increase. Thank you very much.